In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favorite Dollar Tree and Thrift Farmhouse home decor DIYs. Let's get into it. All right, so for this DIY, I have this gather sign that I picked up a while ago. And then I have a long wooden dowel, and I'm using a wood piece that I have lying around. But I wanted to show you, you could make a little platform out of those pallets from the Dollar Tree, and you could use Jenga blocks instead of a dowel. Just use what you have on hand. I'm taking, what is this stuff called? It's from the Dollar Tree. Fill holes with it. Yeah. I'm using that because of the piece I have has holes in it. That piece is for my IKEA nightstands. There was some pieces that we didn't want to use for the inside, and I've been using them in DIYs, and that's my last one. So it's hard to pull the staples out of the back of these, so I just kind of cut the string off the back, kind of sanding it. These pieces are pretty rough, so I don't worry about making it incredibly smooth because I feel like it would take me forever to get in all of the grooves. But we got it smoothed down. We are going to paint this with White Waverly chalk paint. And I like to use those little clear cutting mats that I have it on. That's from the Dollar Tree. And I love it when I'm working on paint projects because I can just kind of pick up the mat and move that out of the way and move on to another project without touching the item. So that's why I have that. And I'm just trying to get in all of the grooves. You want to make sure every side and angle is covered. And I'm using a foam brush, which does eventually get a little bit beat up, especially because the edges are rough, but you know, foam brushes don't last forever anyway. And I am going to do the front and back of this just so that it looks finished if anyone were to see the back. Although where I plan on using it, it won't be seen, but it could if I put it somewhere else. For that little hole on the gather, I just kind of pushed some paint in there with a paintbrush, and then I'm using the end of another paintbrush to swirl it around so that it's not gobbed up, but then I made sure the whole inside was covered. So that's going to get a good coating. I think I did the 2 coats maybe on the top, but I didn't worry about doing a second coat like on all of the edges. And now we're going to get to our base. So I am just going to use some wood glue. Once again, feel free to use hot glue if you want for a quicker hold. And we are going to glue that across. I put it a little bit further back than exactly the middle, but I had already messed around how I wanted this to be, so I kind of knew what I wanted it to be like. And this is just going to give us a little something to have our word attached to. So like I said, you could use the tumbling tower blocks if you wanted and just create a row of them. Here I'm just showing you me painting the back, so we're just going to give that a quick coat. All right, so once that wood glue is all dry, we're going over this with antique wax, and we're just going to brush it on and then wipe it off and let some of that wood grain come through. I did all of the sides and the top. I did not do the bottom on this one. The sides it doesn't wipe off as much just because the material I'm using is a little bit more raw, like rough on the ends, but it is a real wood piece. So we're just going to make sure every bit of that is covered and let that dry. So once my gather sign was dry, I am just sanding it down a little bit to distress it. And at this point, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next. I kind of liked it as is, but I thought, well, that's kind of boring. I feel like I should do a little something else. So I considered some of the rub-on transfers from Dollar Tree, but I didn't have any that I really liked. So after I got done sanding it, I wiped it down with a paper towel, I think is what I used, just to get off all the dust. And I have this stencil also from the Dollar Tree. And we are going to stencil on some flowers. I used the same flower for the whole thing. Eventually, I don't think I show it, but I do cut out one section of this stencil because it was kind of a pain having the whole thing attached. And I just alternated between the colors, sometimes mixing the colors together. Did a light stenciling. Some of them was pretty faint, some of them were thicker. When I got a little bit thicker, I usually had a little bit of bleed through. I had to paint over some of them again with white and go back and fix them up, but I'm not going to show you all of that and bore you. But I just loved this. I didn't, you can see I kind of like have half the flower hanging off some of the spots and just kind of tried to make it a little bit sporadic with no real rhythm. I did start wiping the paper towel, the stencil off with a paper towel in between because I was afraid that any paint that might have come through the other side would mess it up. And then once again, I'm going in with some more Gorilla Wood Glue, and we're going to glue this on. Now, only a couple pieces on the bottom, actually, we're going to touch the bottom. The rest actually rose above it, which is why I didn't put glue there. And then I just put glue on all of the touch points in the back and attach that and let that dry. And I love how this looks. I have the exact spot I want to use it. I'm going to wait a little bit before I put it out, just because I like what I currently have out, but I'll be wanting to switch things up soon. And I love this. I think it came out really great and a little bit different than just my plain old white and gray stuff that I normally do. Okay, so for this next little flip project, I have had this vase, I don't know, probably over 10 years. I used to actually have quite an extensive collection of vases. I probably had, I don't know, maybe around like 30 of them. And when we moved a couple years ago, I realized I didn't not want to move like 4 boxes of glass vases. So I got rid of a lot of them, but I had a couple still on hand. And I really just don't use this. So I wanted to I don't know, give it a new look. So I have seen this idea on a variety of channels, and I don't even remember who I saw it from first. I know that Unicorn Dust Designs has shared different textured vases, or textured, yeah, vases, I think. So she maybe is where I saw this one, but I believe I've seen it multiple places, and I just don't really remember. So I cleaned off the vase with some rubbing alcohol, and then I just took some caulk from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just smearing it over it. I did put a glove on my hand, and I'm just going until I have the whole thing covered. I've painted vases. I've painted them on the inside. I painted them on the outside. I've done a lot of different things, and so I just thought it'd be nice to try something different, I guess. So yeah, I already had a vase laying around, and I just had to spend $1 on the caulk. So I figured, why not give this a try? I fairly recently tried out the mixing baking soda with paint, and I liked that all right. I feel like I need to perfect it a little bit, but I just thought this was I don't know, different texture that I was going to go for. So we're just going to smear that all over, and I did try to clean off the bottom because I didn't want there to be like crusties on the bottom, I guess. And I just did this until it was all fully covered, and then we're going to let this dry thoroughly. I believe the container might have said 2 hours, and this is a paintable caulk, so I guess I'm assuming that's important. I don't know if all caulk is paintable, but the one at the Dollar Tree is, but obviously that's an important piece there. So I took a damp paper towel to just clean off anything on the bottom, and got that all cleaned up, and then left it to dry. So to paint this, I wanted to try doing something brown, maybe to give it more of a wood look, like a wood carved vase. It didn't quite come out that way, but I do like how it came out, so stay with me. I took some antique wax, and I did have a little bit of water in that little paper bowl there that I was kind of thinning it out, and I don't know if I really needed to, but that's what I started out doing. And I'm just brushing that on until I got a nice coverage on it, and then I let it dry for a little bit, and then I wanted it a little bit darker, and here I went in with just some more of the antique wax, but not really thinned out, and just gave that another nice coat. And then I let it dry, and the next day I decided I wanted it a slightly different brown color. Oh, and it felt a little too tacky even after it dried overnight. So I took some brown acrylic paint. I had 2 different colors, and I just used my sponge brush. I actually just used the side of my sponge brush at this time to cover it. So I'm not afraid to try out different paint things, because I'm like, if it doesn't work, just paint it again. You could certainly just paint this white, and it would maybe look more like a ceramic-y thing, or like a gray, and make it look more cement, or a color, whatever. You can obviously do it however you want. But I have a lot of white and grays in my house, and I know brown isn't necessarily an exciting color, but it's a natural color. I like natural elements. So that's what I did. And then I did paint the inside at the top, just so that you wouldn't get a glimpse of the glass or the white from the plaster. So that's what I did there. And here in the end, this is how it looks. And I really like how it came out. You know, if you're not a fan of this, you can certainly paint it a different color. There it is with some greenery. Anyways, All right, so for this first one, I've got some styrofoam balls from the Dollar Tree. They come in multi-packs in different sizes, and a wooden dowel rod. Now, you're going to pick whatever size you have or that works for you for the whole piece. Oh my gosh, that did not make sense. Trying to make it proportionate. So you can use a larger one or a smaller one, a larger dowel rod, whatever you want to do. And we're going to paint the styrofoam ball and the stick in this Kelly green paint. This is just so that we kind of have a good base that won't stand out too much. So I hope that all made sense. I think it'll make more sense as you see we go on. We're making a topiary. Maybe that helps. So now we're going to go in with this clay pot, this terracotta pot from the Dollar Tree. So this is what I was saying. If you're using a larger pot, you might want a larger styrofoam ball, etc. So I'm putting a good coat of white paint on this. Now, I originally thought of doing like a dry brush of the white on here so that the terracotta would really stand out. But this clay pot just soaks up the paint, so there's like no chance to spread it. And I kind of went too heavy in spots. So I did a solid coat of white, and now we're going in with this khaki and brown color, and we're going to dry brush over that. But you can do this however you want. You can paint it a bright color. You can leave it solid white. You could paint it black, whatever you want to do. While editing this video, I realized that I have paint on my sweatshirt. Isn't that fantastic? Yes. Okay. So we're going to distress this to our liking. You do you. What you like is obviously what makes sense because this is for your decor. Now we are moving on to assemble this whole thing. We are going to put a good amount of hot glue in that little hole and put the dowel rod back in there and hot glue around it to make sure that this is not going anywhere. My hands will turn green during the remainder of this DIY because the styrofoam ball was still a little wet. But that's all right. We've got this greenery here. Use whatever you've got on hand. I was digging through my stash for these DIYs, and this is some vine, or it was a garland, I think, from Hobby Lobby that was kind of falling apart. Not as falling apart as I'm making it, but it was on clearance, and I have pulled it apart and used it on a ton of DIYs. But you can use whatever you've got. But this is why I painted the ball green, so that you wouldn't see white peeking through. I'm using a little wooden skewer to kind of poke the holes. Then I used some hot glue and really push the stems down in. And I just kept going with it and going with it until I liked the way it looked. It was a little bit time consuming, but it wasn't hard. So I don't know. I had fun with it. If you like seeing budget-friendly DIYs, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new, please consider subscribing before you leave because I don't want you to miss out on my future videos. And actually, to really make sure of that, if you're subscribed, please make sure your notification bell is turned on. You can adjust your notifications settings to determine how those notifications come through to you. But with that bell turned on, it really helps make sure that YouTube will let you know when I post again. Currently, I try to post a new DIY video every Tuesday, so if you don't see one pop up in your subscription feed, because YouTube does that sometimes, come back to my channel and check it out to see if I have posted one. All right, getting back onto the DIY, you are seeing what I'm doing here. I'm just going and going and going with it until I have the coverage of the greenery that I liked. You could also add some flowers in here if you want. Do whatever floats your boat. Search online for some inspiration, get some ideas, but this is how I am doing mine. Once we have the topiary finished, we wanted to go back to the stem or the trunk, and I am taking the stem from the garland. You could use the stem from like another flower pick, whatever you want to do here, and we're going to hot glue this around. Now, you really want to hold it down until the hot glue is set. And I'm just going to put some hot glue at the top and the bottom, wrapping it around as you see. You don't have to go all the way to the bottom because we're going to shove the bottom of this into some styrofoam as we put together our little planter. So just mostly to the bottom here. And like I said, make sure you hold that down until the hot glue is set so it doesn't come back off. And then I am going to trim off the little stems a little bit just because they were sticking out too much. But I did like that kind of thorny, viney look, so I am leaving them on here. That's kind of why I used it, just trimming them down a little bit. And then I decided I wanted to paint this brown, and first I did some dry brushing. I just am using the brown that I had pulled out for the pot because I still had some left over that I had poured out. But I end up going in a little bit of a heavier coat, but you can still see some of the green through it. Just kind of go with what looks good to you, because I think I already said it. It's your DIY. Now we're going to take some styrofoam and I'm going to hot glue most of it down in there, and then I just take some other smaller pieces and just kind of cram it in there and give ourselves a good base. I don't want this to tip over. Just taking my little scissors and kind of getting the hole started, although that might not be necessary. Putting a good amount of hot glue on this and putting that down in there. Once again, hold it for, just a few seconds, making sure that the hot glue is set before you move on. And then my intention was to use floral moss, and I looked all over and I can't find it. I don't think I used it up, but maybe I did. So I improvised. I may go back later when I find the moss or when I get more. But for now, I just cut up some raffia into little pieces, kind of like grass, putting in some hot glue and putting that down in there and kind of shaking it off and then doing another layer. But do whatever you want. Like I said, floral moss I think would be a little bit better, but we're going with what I got. And that was all I did for this one. I thought it was really cute. And yeah, I was pleased with this one. I thought it was very pretty, and it's not too big, and it could go on a tiered tray for sure, unless it's a super small one. Anyways, I loved it. So for this next one, I have this bamboo rings from the Dollar Tree, and I thought they'd be good for kind of bases for wreaths, because sometimes you just need something to attach to. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to take some of this fern from Waverly chalk paint, and we're going to coat this bamboo ring on all sides. It was very easy to paint, and I'm just going to give it a good coat, because this way it will blend in with what I'm going to use for the wreath. This is not going to be a super full wreath, and so I wanted the ring to just kind of blend in and you wouldn't even really notice, and it worked perfectly for this. So that's why I'm doing this. And then I've got this wreath. Well, no, actually it's not. It's a garland from Target Bullseye Playground, I think is what it's called. And it was only $3. I really wish I could find more of them, but I only found the one. But when I saw it sitting on the shelf, it was wrapped up like this. And I'm like, that would make for a really pretty wreath. I didn't necessarily need something super full. I think it's kind of light and airy. And so I'm just going to work this around our bamboo ring as best I can. I didn't wrap it around a ton. I did wrap it around in a couple spots. I cut open, there was like these loops on either end, probably to hang it. I cut that open and wrapped that around. And then I'm going to go in with this green floral wire and just put that in a few different places where I thought it would be good to help secure it down a little bit more. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It's a very easy way to help me out, to support my channel. It lets me know you like what I'm putting out, and it also lets YouTube know that you are liking my content and makes them more likely to share my videos with new viewers. So that helps me out a ton. So now I'm just taking some of this lace ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I love this stuff. I think it's really pretty. It's like delicate without being too delicate, so it still kind of is a little bit more farmhouse to me. And I am just going to tie that on the bottom, and we're going to tie a loop at the top. And this is how I hang it on my door. I've got this on a closet door. You can see I've got a little command hook on the back, and I just attach a loop to that, and it holds really well. And as long as the ribbon's not too thick, it will go over the door just fine. So for this next one, this is in the summer decor. It might be like the Seashore collection. I can't remember what it's called, but this is currently out at Dollar Tree. And I did make sure to find one that was pretty even, because sometimes they're a little lopsided. And then I have this black faux leather from Dollar Tree. I did want to give you a little peek at the different nautical signs, and I think they're pretty in and of themselves, but I don't do a lot of nautical or really any nautical, so we're going to make it over. When I saw the shiplap background, I thought this is a great farmhouse look, and like I said, I just looked for ones that were even and not lopsided because, well, let's be honest, sometimes the Dollar Tree signs have some imperfections. And I am just measuring out and cutting some squares of this faux leather to go across our sign. And I'm going to show you, I initially was trying to hot glue it, and I don't know if the hot glue, I don't think my glue gun had been on very long, and so it just kind of peeled off, and it's like the glue hardened immediately, which usually only happens if you use metal. So I let it heat up a little bit more, put it onto the high setting, and tried again. Sorry, my head keeps getting in the frame, and so it goes out of focus. And I'm trying to get better at noticing that when I'm doing these. And then I go ahead and put more on it, and I was like, it was a little bit bumpy, and I just didn't love it. So I just wanted to show this to you in case you do something like this similar and you want to just skip the hot glue scenario altogether, because then it just came off very easily. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be attaching something else on here, and I don't want it to come off. So I peeled it off, peeled off the chunks of hot glue. This was very easy to do, and we're going to start over again. So I'm going to go in with this glue. It's kind of like a tacky glue. I don't remember where I got it from. I don't usually use the nozzle because, well, it just gets clogged up. So I just put a bunch out there. I'm spreading it around with a toothpick, and we're going to smooth this out. And this worked out really, really good. The materials on the bottle that it said it used was a wide variety, so I figured it would work really good. And I went ahead and covered all of the squares with the leather squares. You can use any glue you've got though. Super glue gel would be another good option. That's what I was going to use until I saw this in my drawer, and it ended up working great. Hot glue could be used as well. Just keep in mind that it will make it a little bit bumpy underneath the faux leather material. So I let that dry, and while that was drying, I pulled out some Scrabble letters, and a couple of them were faded, so I was just going over them with a permanent marker. I used a fine tip permanent marker, and I did it over all of them, even though they weren't all super faded, but just so they looked the same. You can see the K was particularly faded. I have seen these types of tiles at the Dollar Tree or other craft stores. This is from an actual old Scrabble game that I was going to get rid of. I think it was falling apart or something, and so I kept the tiles for myself. I put them in my craft supplies. So I measured out on my squares here to have these even, and I'm just using more of that same glue to attach these, and I'm trying to get it on the edges, but I didn't want it oozing out the sides. And as I push it down, if it did ooze it out, I just kind of cleaned it up with my fingertip or my fingernail. It does dry clear anyway, but I did just kind of clean it up as I went. And I did put a little bit on the edges as I was laying the tiles together, so that there'd be a little bit of glue in between the two of them. And I am making a sign for my guest bathroom, for a half bathroom. Downstairs, there's nothing in there at all, which is fine, but I thought this would be fun. So I am writing out, take a seat with these tiles. And that is all I'm doing for this one. For this first one, I have this little washboard decor piece. This looks like it was from Target. My friend Kendra sent this to me in a little collab that we did, but I believe there have been some form of washboards also at the Dollar Tree, and it's a pretty traditional like farmhouse style decor piece, so I think you could probably pick something up at like Michael's or Hobby Lobby at different times as well. But I just wanted to give you a really quick and easy idea. It's very simple to do little DIYs. I have this leaf garland, I believe it's from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just wrapping it around itself to make a wreath. And I didn't want to put glue straight on my wreath because I want to be able to take it off and redo this if I want to in the future. So I just tied a little bit of jute twine on the back. It's totally hidden from the front. I kind of create a little bit of a knot there so that I have a place to use the hot glue, but you could just simply glue a wreath straight to the piece. But this is just my little way of doing it so that I don't ruin the garland if I want to take it off, because I do redo a lot of my DIYs because, you know, I make a lot of them. So I use them for a little while and then I take them apart and repurpose everything. And then I have this woodward, I believe this is from the Dollar Tree, but you can get these from other craft stores as well. And I'm just putting a little bit of hot glue on just a couple of touch points. You could also use like super glue gel or something else if you wanted something that you wanted it to last a little bit longer, but I don't typically have trouble with hot glue unless it's like something that's going to be out in the sun. And I just attached this bless to the top, and that was it. Just gluing a couple of things on really just made that piece over. And I love how this one came out. Great little, I guess like a leaner sign, and yeah, I was super happy with this one. So this next one isn't complicated, but has a few more steps. I have this bamboo ring This is from the Dollar Tree. It comes in a 2-pack in 2 different sizes. I believe this is the smaller one. And we're just going to give this a coat of white paint. I'm using some acrylic paint. When I was filming this one, I did not have any more chalk paint. I do get some chalk paint in the time it took me to finish this video, so I use that later on. But yeah, we're just going to paint this. I'm going to paint the insides and the edges. And this is like a raw piece, so it just sucks up the wood, or sucks up the paint, no problem. And I have some burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree, as well as this stencil from the Dollar Tree, and I just wanted to stencil on the word family. And this is a burlap ribbon, and ribbon in general, the paint's probably going to go through, so I have just a plastic mat underneath, which I typically do a lot of my work on. And I'm just using a little bit of white paint. Make sure you don't oversaturate it. That's how you get bleed through when you're stenciling. So I'm just going lightly over this. Another tip is to go for Farmhouse, which is what I'm doing, because it doesn't need to be crisp and clean when you're doing Farmhouse. So anyways, I'm going in with a small paintbrush. I wanted to connect, you can see how the paint came through there. I wanted to connect my letters because I just like how that looks a little bit better. So I'm just using a small paintbrush. I also went over a couple spots that were a little bit lighter than I wanted, but I just touched it up with a little paintbrush where I wanted to connect the letters and where I needed it brightened up a little bit. Not too much. I didn't want it to be, I didn't want to overthink it. Overthinking it with paint and stencils is usually where you end up messing it up. So I just tried to keep it pretty simple here, but just, use whatever stencils you have, and you can always make some adjustments with a small paintbrush. And then we're going to let this dry. I'm going to trim this up. Now my intention, I forgot by the time I got to this step, was to double up the ribbon once it was painted, because I didn't want the paint to go through both of them. But before I cut it here, I was going to double it up, and I forgot. But that's okay. I'm going to show you a couple of things that I had to change on this. I'm going to show you the changes. But anyways, we're going to just glue this across, and I'm just using a little bit of hot glue. I'm going to use this little silicone spatula that's from the makeup department in Dollar Tree. You can also use the little finger protectors. Dollar Tree sells those as well. And I'm just going to use some hot glue, and I'm going to wrap it really tight because I wanted it to be nice and taut in the front, and fold that over and make a little kind of banner on it. Now I'm taking some lamb's ear scraps from a piece that I have that I've been pulling from for a while, and I want to make a little bit of some greenery pieces to attach to this. This is a mini wreath. We're going to use it more as like a door hanger or to hang on some hooks. And I'm going to start by just gluing a couple of my pieces together. There's not a lot of surface on this, obviously, to glue the pieces. So I'm just trying to arrange it well ahead of time, and just make sure that you hold it down, protect your fingers, and then hold it down until the glue begins to actually cool and set, because greenery and floral stems have pretty stiff like centers to them, and they'll just kind of bounce back up. And then I have this burlap sticker from the Dollar Tree, and I pulled off the sticker part because I wanted to use some hot glue, and I just put that there in the center. I think I do end up trimming off one of these leaves. We'll get back to that because I felt like it was kind of overshadowing the word a little bit. So first I wanted to do a little hanger at the top. I just tied this on with didn't tie it, the little loop technique where you just slide the ends in through a loop. And then I have these wood beads that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. This was from their Christmas craft area, and obviously they're not Christmassy, but I got it when it was 75% off, so there's a score. And I wanted to just tie these beads on. The little beads are just, I think, from Dollar Tree, just something that I had in my stash. And I thought that this was really cute. The problem is that if you hang this up, well, first of all, I'll show you. Yeah, I'm just going to clip off one of those leaves because I felt like it was covering the word a little too much. But the problem is with the greenery on one side, it wouldn't hang nice. It's going to like turn topsy-turvy. So I thought about trying to put a weight on it in the back of the ring to balance it out, but instead I decided to redo my hanger. So I took that off, and we're just going to tie on some twine on each side, but I wanted to keep a little bit of the bead detail, and I needed to balance it out. So I decided to just put some beads on one side of the twine. I ended up adding a third bead when I did it this way, but I just wanted to show you a way to kind of solve that problem if you do something that is off sides. And it's still kind of like the beads kind of balance it out without making it totally symmetrical, if that makes sense, because there's the greenery on one side, the beads on the other. Anyways, I thought that this was really cute. This could also be added to the center of another wreath. I'm just going to use it as like maybe a door hanger, I'm not sure, or just like on some decorative hooks. But you can see here, I just tied that on, and I am going to just thread that last little bit of twine through the bottom one, and then I trimmed it off. I did end up putting, I didn't show you it, but I did put a dab of glue at the bottom where I tied that knot as well, just to keep that all in place, and that balances it out. Now, filming these things is always difficult. It was also a really cloudy day when I filmed this, which keeps happening to me. So there's a lot of shadows here, so I just wanted to show it to you. There's a little bit of shadows here too, but show it to you in a couple different ways so you could get a good look at it. But I love how this one came out. This one was a super fun one to make. For our next DIY, I have just a scrap piece of wood, just a little stub of a wood piece. And I've got Snow White by Waverly. Is this replacing the regular white? Because my store didn't have the regular white anymore. It just had the Snow White. So I don't really know how different it was from the white, but I was out, I replenished it. This is what I've got. We're just going to give this piece of wood a coat on all of the sides and the ends. The ends are rough cut, so I just kind of had to put a little bit more paint there to make sure it was covered. Although I didn't need to cover it perfectly because we are going to sand it down and make it look a little bit more rustic. And then I'm going to use Moss by Waverly and another stencil. I guess this is the same stencil we already used because there's the family, but and I'm going to stencil on Faith. Now my moss paint was pretty thick, so I put a little bit of water in there and shook it up, but I didn't mix it, and I should have. So this got really, like the shaking it up did not mix it enough, got really watery and totally bled through. So that looks horrible. So I wiped it off, put on a little bit of white paint, but actually the white paint was still drying, so I just flipped this over to do another side, and I took a popsicle stick and stirred up the paint. It's still really thick, but stirring it up with a popsicle stick did the trick. So I just stenciled it, and then I did touch up a little bit with my paintbrush and once again closed up some of those letters. I guess just the one letter for this word. And this is just a cute little piece for like a tiered tray. I love this color, moss, and celery is another color from Waverly. I love that for like my everyday decor color, and also blends really well into spring. And once that was fully dry, of course, you don't want to do this while the paint could still be wet. I just sanded down the edges to bring out the wood and just kind of faded down the word a little bit. And then I'm going to seal this project with some DIY wax. It's just a clear wax. You could also use Mod Podge or something else, but the wax gives it a really nice finish, and it just kind of seals in your paint. And I like the, I don't know, feels finished. Yeah. And I'm just buffing that in with a piece of an old t-shirt, and that's how this one came out. You can see I got really close, so you could see like the wood grain. It can be a rough piece of wood. It doesn't have to be anything like, you know, super finished and polished, and this was a fun one. My last DIY, these last two were just, well, I guess 3 of these 4 were really just kind of quick, easy, simple type of pieces. This is a little cutting board decorative piece. This was also sent to me by Kendra when we did our little collab, and I should have just sanded it from the beginning. I started just by putting more paint over the words, but I should have sanded it at first. So now I'm pretty much just sanding off paint. I didn't need to sand it off altogether. I just wanted it to cover better. So we're going to clean up our little mess here, and now we're going to go in with some paint again. I went heavier on those slats, but I do paint the whole thing. But I wanted this in the end to be very rustic-y farmhouse. Once again, this is a great little tiered tray piece. I'll be honest, my tiered tray still has Christmas stuff on it, so that's why I didn't show it to you on a tiered tray. But we're going to paint the edges, and I'm going to paint the back too, just because I wanted, I don't know, I just wanted it to look more complete. So I wanted to get the paint out of the center, not completely, but I didn't want it to be as heavy there. So I was trying to go in with sandpaper and it wasn't working. So I just went in with this little tool. It's supposed to be like a Cricut tool, but it's from Dollar Tree. I don't have a Cricut, and I use their tools all the time. And I'm just scraping that to kind of just fade down that white in between the slats, because I just wanted it to look old and worn and not like it was freshly painted. And then I'm taking this stencil from the Dollar Tree. This is a really fun stencil. I have 2 of these that are like a similar material, and I didn't have anything that fit right on the cutting board, but I was like, I can divide it up. You see those signs with home where the H and O is on one line, M and E is on the other. So that's what we're going to do. So I just figured out where I wanted that to be placed so it would all be centered. Just a little bit. We're going to use that moss paint again, so just a little bit on the paintbrush. Make sure you dab a lot of it off. It's better to go over it a couple times than to put too much on. And I don't need it to be super dark. I don't mind seeing the white through it. Peel that off, worked great. And I like to use a baby wipe or a damp paper towel kind of right away on the stencils. It's just so much easier to clean them. And then I lined the M and the E up underneath that, just making sure that it was all even. And that's how this one came out. I thought about putting a bow on the top. You could certainly do that if you want to add in a little bit more detail, but I'm going for more like crisp, clean right now. I kind of go over the top with Christmas and fall stuff, and so I just kind of like other stuff to just be a little bit more simple, but add as many details as you want. I'm also just scraping those lines again, and we're going to sand over the whole thing. Don't go too hard. Make sure your paint is like dry. I didn't want to sand it all off, but I did want to just kind of fade that down a little bit. And that's just my style preference. You don't have to do that, but I love how this came out. You can see like the rustic, rough edges. And that is it for this DIY. To start off, we've got this plant. This was from the Dollar General. It says $4. I'm pretty sure I paid like well under $1 for this. I picked up a bunch of these one time when Dollar General had a huge clearance, and I bought a ton of plants for very little. So we're going to go in. I'm going to just show you this part briefly. My plan was to go in with this elephant color, and the white lines here are kind of recessed, and I was going to do this thing where then you pulled them out. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe what I was trying to do, but I kind of forgot about it and then just painted a thick coat of white paint over it. And I was like, okay, well, forget about that white or the elephant color underneath. So we're going to still bring a little bit of that back up, but I just wanted to kind of spruce up the base for this plant to go better with my decor. So we're giving this a coat of white paint, and I am doing the bottom as well. And then I'm going to go in with sandpaper. That didn't really work super great. What I wanted to do was sand off the, I wanted to highlight the grooves where I had the dark paint. So I'm going in with this little metal scraping tool. This ended up actually working pretty good. I'm not trying to bring it out super dark. I'm just wanting to bring like a textured, rustic look to this planter. And so we're going to scrape it, we're going to sand it, and then we're going to go ahead and dry brush some added colors on. So I'm going in with some of the elephant color. Then when I got too much, I would go back over it with my white paint just to dull down what I had gotten too heavy on. So this may have not been the best method to get the look that I wanted, but I got the look that I wanted. And in the end, isn't that all that really matters? So I'm layering in some burnt umber. And once again, I'm just using a stencil brush, dabbing off most of the paint and just doing a little bit of a dry brush. I love this look, and if you don't love that look, you can just do a flat color. But keep in mind when you find plants, potted plants that are on sale, on clearance, if you don't like the pot, it's okay, you can paint it. And then I remembered that I wanted to put feet on the planter. So this could have been done before I painted it, but it wasn't, so I'm going to go in now with some wood beads, and I'm using some Gorilla household glue, and then also a little bit of hot glue just to try to get an immediate hold, but the hot glue, in my opinion, wouldn't hold as super great. So we're just going to attach 4 of these to the bottom. I almost only did 3, more like a triangle pattern, but I did 4, and then I went back in and painted them. So would have been easier to do it from the beginning, but sometimes my projects evolve or I forget what I'm doing. Anyways, I like how this one came out. Next up, I have this glass jar. This is a salad dressing bottle. This is the brand Marzetti. I think they've switched them to plastic, which is kind of a bummer because I was saving them up. But you could also use like some of those, well, basically any jar you want, whether you pull it out of your recycling bin or you buy it at the thrift store, or buy it at the Dollar Tree, coffee, you can buy those jarred coffee drinks. Anyways, I'm taking a jar, but I thought the shape of this was perfect for like an old milk bottle look. I did clean it with some rubbing alcohol to get off any fingerprints or, oils that come from our hands. And I'm going to stipple on this white paint. And I end up doing like 2 to 3 coats to get full coverage. And I dried it with my heat gun in between. But I'm not going to do a whole lot with this one. This one's going to be pretty simple, but I love this look. So yeah, I was drying the bottom so that I could set it down and do the top. But the stippling is nice because you don't get the brush strokes, and it also gave a very nice gentle texture. You could also add in some baking soda if you wanted to have like a thicker texture. I wasn't necessarily going for that look, so I just did it this way. If you also want the glossy look, you could always paint the inside of the jar and just take your time kind of putting only a little bit of paint in and twirling the jar around till everything's coated, letting the excess drip out, and then you can get the glossy outside if that's what you want. But this is what I wanted, so that's what I did. And all we're gonna do here is just very, very minimal embellishments. So I'm just gonna wrap around some twine, but I did end up having to use some hot glue just because of the ridges on the top of this. I couldn't get it like covered the way I wanted to. So I did a little bit of hot glue, not like the whole way around, but when I was going over those ridges, I did. And then I also wanted to do the top rim of this as well, because that's how I wanted it to be, although it's not going to be fully seen. So not like the top rim, but up to the top, I guess is what I was trying to say. Anyways, now we're going to go in with a lighter and burn off any of the fuzzies. Just, I don't like the super hairy look, but I also like the burnt look that it gets when you use a lighter. So just use it with caution. Be careful. If there's like a really, really fuzzy spot, sometimes the flame will carry a little bit. So, you know, use safety. And then I'm just doing a very simple shoestring bow. I do cut the tails on that, but not a ton, because I like the longer look. And I just put some lamb's ear in this, and I thought this came out really pretty. Very simple, but something nice to kind of mix in with your other decor. It's nice to have a lot of neutral pieces, at least in my opinion. I like color as well. I mean, brown's a color, green's a color here, but I like it. I like to just decorate that way. Up next, I have this spool. This had some thick braided ribbon trim stuff from Hobby Lobby. And when I was done with it, I saved it because I was like, this is kind of cool. Kind of could make this into look like a vintage like spool. So that's what we're doing. I'm going to tear off this top layer because it's a little bit more shiny and I thought it would be harder to paint. And I did that on the top and bottom. And then I'm once again going in with like a chippy brush to do this little stippling motion. And I'm going to do a couple shades of brown. This lighter one ends up not being seen a ton, but sometimes you just kind of have to get going and, I don't know, feel it out. So I'm going to paint the whole thing, all of the surfaces that can be seen. I'm going to paint with this color, and then we're going to go ahead and layer it with a darker one as well. And this took a couple of coats, but I just kind of went until it was covered the way that, you know, I wanted it to be. I don't want to say that I was trying to make it look exactly like wood because I didn't know if I could pull that off, but I did want it to have a little bit more of that feel, and I wanted it to look older and a little bit worn. So that's kind of what I'm doing. But I think it's fun to just take things that you normally would have thrown out and be like, oh, I could do something with this. And I don't know, that's what we're doing. Now I'm dry brushing in with a much lighter color here, and just I'm going with what I feel. I don't really know how else to say it, but this is what I like. Okay, so I thought about just leaving it empty, but then I was like, no, I kind of wanted to have this rope look, and I had this thicker, I don't know if it's called jute cord or rope. I believe it's from the Dollar Tree, but you can buy it in various places. And I didn't have enough to go all the way around, but I thought that was kind of nice. Here I was trying to decide how I wanted to lay it out. I cut off the end because it had a piece of tape around it to keep it from unraveling. So I cut that off so I could have the end frayed. And it just looks like a used piece of cord. I didn't hot glue the very, very end because I wanted the frayed piece to be sticking up. And I just styled it with some of my other pieces. And I think it looks really nice in a little ensemble. It gives a nice little rustic farmhouse feel. Up next, I've got a couple of glass bottles that I had in my kitchen. And we're once again going to clean them with some rubbing alcohol to get any fingerprints and oils or grease off of them. I don't remember what these are from, but I had them and I was going to just get rid of them and throw them in the recycle bin because I was tired of them taking up space in my kitchen. And then my friend was like, why don't you try to make something? And I was like, I think I can do that. Well, had said, I'm like, I'm going to see if I can figure something out. If I can't today, then I'm getting rid of them. And she was like, do something with them. So she pushed me to do so. So we're going in with a chippy brush. We're stippling on the paint. This did take a couple of coats, and I'm going to do all of it, including the bottom. And I did this with two different bottles. And now I wanted to go with a little bit of color here. I love using Waverly's Celery and Moss. Those are two different shades of green in their line, and I love them for my everyday decor, and I think they blend really well into spring. So I taped off the portion that I wanted to paint. We're once again doing the stippling. You can see that, but that just helps. I feel like on glass especially, it gives better coverage and you don't get the brush strokes and the paint doesn't peel off from the glass again. Just make sure that it is fully dry in between the coats. That's very important. But you could also easily do this with spray paint. I'm using a heat gun at a low temp, so it's not a hot heat to help dry. That just helps speed things up. You can also use a hair dryer. I did that for a long time until my hair dryer bit the dust. For the second jar, vase, bottle, I wanted it to be like similar but different. I think that's nice when you're doing sets or pairs. So this time I'm going in with Waverly in the color Moss. And then so I did a smaller portion on the bottom. These bottles are also two different sizes. You'll see in a minute. But I did the bottom, and then I also did the top rim of the bottle. So I wanted them to be similar but different. And then we're going to peel off the painter's tape, and this came out beautifully, but you can see I went over the tape. My paintbrush got out of hand at the top there, so I'm just going to cover that up a little bit. And then I actually decided that I wanted to do another coat of white, so that's why it was taped off again, and I did that. And now we're going to go in with some Mod Podge. I just wanted to seal in the paint to make sure it didn't chip. I don't think it would have. I feel like the stippling technique gets better coverage and it is less likely to chip, but I just wanted to be sure. But I did use a matte finish of Mod Podge because I still wanted that matte look. I didn't want it to look glossy or shiny at all. Once our Mod Podge was dry, I pulled out this ribbon. This is a burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I thought this went really well with kind of the rustic farmhouse look. And I'm just going to put that around the line here just to add a little bit of texture. You could just do the paint, but I just thought this was really nice. So I didn't put hot glue the whole way around. I just kind of did it at the beginning and the end. I am using a finger protector. I don't always do that, but I will always recommend that you do that. And I did the same thing you can see on the other one where the paint spot here was much smaller, but I did it there and as well as the top. Sorry, I feel like I am jumbling over my words, probably because I'm trying to keep up with the video. You know, it seems like you have lots of time to talk, but you know, I don't want my videos to be like 45 minutes long, so. Okay, and then I was like, I kind of wanted to add one more detail. So I have these burlap stickers from the Dollar Tree. They come with that little sticker that often, it's like a little pop dot kind of thing. They often come off. I just use hot glue. So that's what I'm going to do. And I was just trying to decide where I wanted to put it, and I decided to put it on the, like overlapping this burlap ribbon. And I thought that was a really nice touch. And I am just going to style these with a little bit of greenery in them. And I think this is a really nice piece. I like the height of them. Sometimes you want things with more height in your decor, and these offer that. For this DIY, I'm working with a cutting board sign. So it's shaped like a cutting board, but it's thin like a sign from the Dollar Tree. This has been worn a little bit, but I'm showing you how, I'm not going to show you in depth how I did this, but if you want to scrape off the paper, just lay a damp paper towel on it, and you might have to do a couple layers because there's like the glossy layer of the paper, then there's the paper, and then there's sometimes some glue. But I did that and scraped it all off, and then here I'm just sanding off anything that's left. There really wasn't much, and then I'm using my little handy vacuum to vacuum up any dust and also clean up our surface as well. Now, if you didn't want to do this, you could paint over the paper. Sometimes that works, but sometimes the paper will end up curling up. You could also glue on some scrapbook paper on top of that. So you don't necessarily have to take that step, but I do think it looks really nice when you do. And I'm going in with Waverly chalk paint in Snow White, I believe. And once again, the chippy brush, I'm learning how much the chippy brush is my friend. Now, I did have to just pull a hair out. Sometimes the chippy brush loses, I guess not hair, bristles. But they really are nice for a lot of projects. So I'm doing not a full coat, but I am doing a pretty thorough coat, but I don't mind some of that MDF board coming through a little bit. But I did a couple coats of that, and now I'm super, super lightly going over with some antique wax. Very little is on my brush, and I'm just doing light strokes. I did mostly in one way, and then I did a couple in the opposite direction. I did want this to look like an old wooden type cutting board, although obviously it's thin and doesn't actually look like a cutting board. Anyways, I have this Farm Fresh stencil from the Dollar Tree. I love this stencil. I hope they come out more in this material, like this stencil material. I feel like they work really good. So I'm taping that down and I'm going over, this is sped up, but it still took a long time and I took out a lot of the footage. I am using Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and the key for the stencils is to not have too much paint. And if you have to go over multiple times, that's fine, but then you don't get the bleed through. I had 0 bleed through on this, and I've used this stencil many times, and it works really, really well. The other key, I think, is to go for the farmhouse look or something that's not super crisp, because I could have gotten a little bit of a darker look on this stencil if I went over it again, but I honestly didn't want a super dark look, and I'm actually going to fade it down even more. So, but that came out, you can see, crystal clear, but we're gonna rough it up a little bit. So I'm going back over with my sandpaper. Once this is totally dry, of course, because you don't want to smear the paint, that'll be a problem. But I wanted it to look older and not as crisp and dark. So now I'm wiping off the dust, and you can see how that came out. You can see so much texture here. And then I wanted a little something through the handle here, and I wanted something thicker than just regular, like the thin jute twine. So I'm using this. Again, I don't know if it's like the nautical rope or a jute cord. I'm not sure exactly what it's called. It is from Dollar Tree, although I've picked some up from Hobby Lobby as well. And this is too thick to tie in a knot. I thought it would just look really weird. So I'm just going to glue the two ends together, and then I'm going to take a slightly smaller rope, and I'm going to hot glue that around the end and just wrap that a few times. And I thought this gave a really nice finished look, and this would be a really cute sign to lean up like on your kitchen counter or something, or I guess anywhere. Or with this cord, you could actually hang it from, like if you have some decorative hooks in your kitchen. But I thought this was a good way to finish it off, and just use a little bit of glue here at the end. And I, once again, went in with my lighter, burn off the fuzzies, and it also gives it a really nice burnt look. And this is really pretty. I don't have this displayed in my kitchen because I wanted to take a picture of it where it was in some good lighting, but I love how this one came out. I was very, very pleased with this DIY. First up, I have this piece from the Dollar Tree. I picked this up, I think, last year, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them again this year, or anything similar that you could pick up at another store would work just fine. But I just wanted to give it a little bit of a facelift. So I am stippling on some white paint mixed with baking soda. This gives a really fun texture. I've heard people talk about the salt wash, which is a paint additive which works similarly to baking soda, but it's specifically designed for this purpose. But I don't have it, so I'm just using baking soda. Now, I will say that this got a little bit messy because I'm trying to stipple it in between all of the little openings of the letters. So when I was shoving the paintbrush in those areas, it was splattering a little bit. So just, protect your space. I was able to clean it up. This baking soda, comes up pretty easy. But I'm just going to go a little bit thicker on the front, but I am covering the insides here. And then for the bottom, I just did like a plain white paint because I didn't want the texture to disrupt how it stood up on its own. But look at that texture. I love this. So to pull out that texture that we've just added, we're going to use a little bit of brown paint. I've been saying lately in my videos that I've been working through my craft stash, and so that's what I'm doing. And I just pulled out whatever brown paint I had. I think it might have been burnt umber. And I use a chippy brush with just a little bit of paint on there, not much. And when I went over it, it really pulled out that texture. And then I also highlighted the edges. And then I did on these side pieces here, tops and sides, I did a little bit of it. I didn't worry about it as much, but I did want to get some coverage on that as well. And then I went in with some Mod Podge, and I did a really thick coat here. I did this to help make the baking soda not rub off or chip off. I don't know if it would, but just to be sure. And I did use a hard coat Mod Podge because I had that on hand. If I didn't have that on hand, I would just use a regular matte or glossy finish, whatever you like. But I love how this came out. Super simple little facelift on this piece, but it does give it a whole new look, and I was thrilled with how that one came out. We're going to start by taking the chalkboard tag from Dollar Tree. I only had one left in my pack, but that's all I needed. We're going to take off the little hanger here. We're not going to be using that. We're going to use some twine later on. And I wanted to paint this white. So I'm using my chippy brush, even though I knew that that would give more texture, but I didn't want the heavier brush strokes of a different paintbrush. And I did have to do a couple coats in this, being careful because as it is painted, it gets wet and it's cardboard, so you need to let it dry and not get it too saturated. But overall, I ended up liking the look of painting this white, even though you can see a little bit of the black through it. Once that was dry, I pulled out these black and white floral stickers that I had in my stash from some event I went to that had kind of a crafting element to it. But you could use some rub-on transfers or even a stencil, which is what I thought about doing. But I love this black and white, but I didn't want it to be quite as crisp as a black and white. So I went over this with some like beige paint that I had mixed up for another project. And first I was like, thought it was too heavy in places and was wiping it off. And then I ended up really, really liking this look. So I just kind of kept going over it. Not too heavy on the paintbrush, but I went quite heavy until I had the desired look. We're going to set that tag aside for just a moment, and I'm going to take some jute twine and I'm just going to wrap the end of it with tape to give me a point to thread my beads here. Sorry for the lighting here. I had a little of sun peeking through my blinds, but I'm going to just use beads I had on hand. Pretty sure the square ones, I know the square ones came from a beaded garland from Dollar Tree, and the white ones were ones that I already had on hand from another beaded garland that I took apart and used. And then I have tassels already made up from previous projects. So I went through and pulled out one in the coordinating twine. I used a little tool to spread open the opening here just so that I could thread my twine through it. And then I had a little piece that was on there from when I had attached this twine somewhere else. So I clipped that off, or snipped that off rather, and tied that on real good in a double knot. And then I'm going to take the twine and thread it up just a couple of those beads to help just keep it secure. You could also put a dab of hot glue on the top of the knot, and then I trimmed that down. I'm taking the other end of our twine and we're going to thread that through our little tag, and this is just going to be the other side of our beaded garland. Once again, I'm going to double knot that and feed that up into our beaded garland, and just a couple, and that just helps kind of secure it. But I love how this came out. I thought it was really pretty. I was really happy with painting over the sticker just to kind of fade it down a little bit, but let me know what you think about it. This next one is a little mini ladder sign, I guess, that I picked up from Dollar General. I picked this up, I think I paid maybe 20 cents for it. I actually picked up a couple of them. Their after Christmas clearance or after season clearance is awesome. And I was like, I know I can make this over. And if you don't have one of these, you can easily make these with some dowel rods. You can get square dowel rods and make them. So we heated that up just with my heat gun to help loosen the glue. I thought I was gonna have to cut it out, but I just loosened the glue with the heat gun, carefully grabbed the pieces because they were metal and the heat gun obviously warmed them up, and twisted them out of there. I also took the twine out of the top handle piece and sanded those holes down, filled them with spackling, let that dry, and gave them a good sanding to smooth it out. This piece is going to have a pretty simple makeover. We're going to make a stain. So in a paper bowl, I have some water, and then I'm just putting in a couple different colors of paint, a brown paint and a beige paint. We're going to mix this up really, really good and give ourselves a stain. And I'm just going to brush this across the little ladder and wipe it with a paper towel. Now you can see that some of the areas with where the spackling has been, it wasn't adhering as good, but we're going to disguise that in just a minute, so no worries. Depending on how dark you want this to be, depends on how much paint versus water you put in there, how long you let it sit on the wood before you wipe it off. So you can certainly customize this, and it's a great way to get some color without actually having to use stain. And it was helping me use up some of those little bits of paint that I had left that I just am trying to use up what's in the bottles. Once that was dry, I went in with my chippy brush and some white paint. And we're going to dry brush over this, but we are going to build up the color. I wanted it to be a little bit more of a white wash look. So I started out with less and then I kept adding to it. I made sure to get all of the sides. I was just going for a more rusticy farmhouse look. You could also just give this a solid coat of paint. Again, I know not everyone's going to find this piece, but you might be able to find something similar or make one with some dowel rods. But I just wanted to rustic that up. And here I have it just displayed with a beaded garland hanging over it. Be really cute on a kitchen counter with a tea towel in there, which is probably what I'm going to do. And but I absolutely love how this came out. So let me know what you think of this piece. Up next, I have this mini tobacco basket. This was another Christmas clearance item from Dollar General, but you can find these in various home decor stores, maybe even at a thrift store or an old one that you have at home that you just want to kind of give it a new look. There's a couple pieces where the basket was a little bit ripped, so that's why you're seeing the faux stain that we made here with the brown paint and water not taking quite as good to it, but it's okay. You know, rustic, it's okay. So once again, we're just painting this on with a paintbrush. I'm letting this soak in a little bit more before I wipe it off, but we're going to do all of the edges, all of the sides, and just darken this up a little bit. I want it to be a little bit of a darker brown than the lighter color that it came in. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot. Also, leaving a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite DIY is. If you don't know what to say, you can also just leave an emoji. But all of those interactions do help out my channel a whole lot, so I would appreciate it. It lets me know that you like my videos, and it lets YouTube know that you like my videos. To embellish this little basket, we're just going to put some florals. These are just some scraps that I had. I believe these were from the Dollar Tree, and I like them because they're a little bit more neutral, which sometimes I do neutral. I just did a bunch of stuff with color for spring, so if you're into that, make sure to check those out. Now I'm tying that with some twine. My head got in the way because, yes, I was holding the twine with my teeth. Yeah, I use fancy techniques here, but we're just going to wrap these stems together with some twine. I just tied a knot at the top of it and then wrapped it around, just making sure I was covering up all of the green, just kind of going until it was covered. We're going to end it with a little bit of hot glue, making sure you don't burn your fingers. And then I needed to trim off the rest of the stems, so I used, I think those are wire cutters. And then there were still these sharp edges hanging out, and plus you could still see like the green and not like the metal. So I'm just going to use a little bit more twine with some hot glue and very carefully covering that up, trying to not burn my fingers. Finger protectors are handy, but I just was trying to get it done and I didn't stop to put any on. But this worked out really good. And then I did use a lighter to kind of burn off any fuzzies from the twine, but also any glue strings. And just be careful you don't set your florals on fire. And just a couple dabs of hot glue, holding that down because this would just kind of bounce back up. So I held it down until the glue started to set. And this is going to be really cute. It kind of looks weird here. I should have actually styled it differently for the video, maybe with a candle in front of it. But this is going to be super fun to decorate with. For this DIY, we're going to use some Easter eggs, but we're not making Easter decor. These are from the Dollar Tree. I picked them up last year at the end of the season, like for 50 cents. But if you've got some Easter eggs left over, we're going to make these into some farm fresh eggs. You can buy faux farm fresh eggs at the store. So we are going to make our own at a fraction of the cost. And I mixed up some beige paint. I was going for the colors. If you have ever seen, which most of you probably have, farm fresh eggs, they are beautiful. So I made this pretty beige color, and I am just using a wooden skewer and an empty ribbon spool to house my skewers so that the eggs can dry. And then I did half of them like that, and then I added in a little bit of pink, like a really light pink, to some of this beige and made a slightly pink egg because there are some beautiful farm fresh eggs that are pink. And I'm just painting the one end while I'm holding it, and then I put it on top of the skewer, and then I paint the rest of it, and then I let it dry. And I think I did like 3 coats on each of these. And then once that's all dry, we got to make our farm fresh eggs speckled. So I'm adding in a little bit of brown paint to the existing beige paint that I had. And this did get a little bit messy. Protect your workspace. It took me a little bit. I'm using an older, stiff paintbrush. A toothbrush would work well for this. Just be careful you don't get the splatter to go too far, okay? It can get a little out of hand if you're not careful. But this came out, honestly, better than I even thought it would. And I've got these beautiful speckled eggs. And the one is like a beigey, it kind of looks green here, but it's more like a beige color, although there are farm fresh eggs that are green as well. So we're going to use the little crate that they came in, but if you don't have an egg carton that yours come in, you can just use an egg carton from the store, cut it down. And I didn't want to use more moss than needed, So I'm cutting up little pieces of fabric in my stash. I think it was like a scarf from Dollar Tree, just making little pieces of them and gluing them to the bottom, making sure it's only at the bottom so that it's not going to be seen, but that it will elevate the egg so that I don't have to use more moss. And I'm just going to put hot glue, as you can see, mainly around the perimeter of each of the openings, each of the circles. And that is so that it's seen. I don't need a bunch of it underneath because you're not going to be able to see it, right? And then I'm going to take a hefty amount of glue and glue the egg in. I did some of them straight up. I did some of them slightly turned. I didn't want it to be completely like all over the place, but I didn't want it to look like perfection either. So as I'm pushing the moss in, I do kind of tap out any extra just so that I'm not wasting it. And then once I started building them in here, I was like, okay, I want a little bit more of that moss in between. So I'm just putting some hot glue and then I just used whatever tool I could grab. You could use a little wooden skewer or a popsicle stick to just kind of put that moss down in because I want it to look not, you know, super perfection here. And I love how this came out. This is going to be cute, probably like on a book stack or something in my decor, but little homemade farm fresh eggs. For this first DIY, I have this blank sign. I picked this up from Dollar General on clearance, but Dollar Tree has similar ones, and so does Walmart and Hobby Lobby, so wherever you can find one. I'm just pulling off the hanger in the back because I don't need that. I'm just going to use this sign as a leaner, and I'm trying the candle wax chippy paint look method. I've done this before a couple of times, and I feel like I have some room for improvement here, but I'm going to show you what I did. So you're going to take a white candle, white candle, because that is wax, and we're going to rub this on different parts of our sign. Now, I feel like I should be a little bit more purposeful where I choose to put it, but that's okay. You're going to see how it all comes together. So you're going to rub that wherever you don't want the paint to come off. Now, in my mind, or where you do want the paint to come off. So in my mind, I was thinking, I like this white base. I want some of this white to come through. But I ended up making white my top coat as well. So I probably should have done that differently. But nonetheless, you're going to rub the wax on where you want it. It's just a cheap candle from the Dollar Tree. And then I'm going over with blue. This is called Ocean from Waverly Chalk Paint. And I did do some wax on the edges as well. And we're going to just give this a nice coat and let that dry. Now, because of the wax, we're not going to use our heat gun to let it dry. I'm just going to let it air dry in between. And then I'm going back with more of the candle wax and we're going to apply it in some more places. You can kind of see where it's already previously been applied. So I'm trying to do it in different spots. And you can do as many colors, as many layers as you want. I don't know that more than like 4, well, I don't know. I guess depending on the size of the piece. I mean, you can do this on like furniture and everything too. So I don't know. Maybe there's no limit. But now our next color is going to be brown. I'm just using an acrylic brown paint that I had on hand. Once again, giving that just one smooth coat. Not going over the top as far as like, you know, a ton of it. Just one really good coat. And then we're going to let that naturally dry. If you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out so much. It helps YouTube know that someone likes my video. And the more people that do that, the more they're thinking, oh, maybe someone else is going to like this video. So it helps me out because then I know what you like, but it also helps YouTube want to push my video out, which of course helps me out. All right, so my brown was dry. We're going back in with some more candle wax and we're going to do a top coat of white. I did end up doing 2 coats of the white, and I also went around the back to just touch up any spots where I'd kind of gotten paint back there just to make it look a little bit cleaner. If you are new to my channel, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Leanne, and I enjoy sharing budget-friendly DIYs here on this channel. And if you're new, I would love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel. Now that all of our painting is done, I am going to go on with my heat gun to soften up the wax. I've never done it this way before, but I had read somewhere about doing that. You can also use a hair dryer. And then I'm going in and I'm trying to scrape off the paint. And the idea is that it's going to come off in different layers based on where you put your wax. So I am trying to scrape off the wax. I also did go back in between the grooves. There was some wax there, but I also just wanted to kind of scrape that down. And I'm just kind of heating it up a section and scraping it. I don't know if the heating it up helped. This is the first time I've done it that way, but when I read that, I was like, well, I mean, I guess that makes sense that it would be easier that way, but I don't know. I don't know. Let me know. Have you tried that method? Have you tried this chippy look method using the candle wax? I would love to hear any tips and pointers if you have some. And then once I was done scraping, I also went in with some sandpaper and I just smoothed out any of the edges where the different layers were, just smoothed it all out. And then if I thought I saw another spot where there was wax, I went in and scraped it again. And we're going for an old, like barnwood type look. So you really can't go wrong with just hacking away at it. That's how I view it anyway. I went in with a baby wipe just to wipe off any of the dust and chipped paint pieces, and then went in with some DIY wax, clear wax, to just seal that in. You could also use some Mod Podge, but I'm just applying that with an old scrap of a t-shirt. And then for the sign, I have this home word, this wood word. I think this is from the Dollar Tree, but once again, you can get these at Walmart and Hobby Lobby and probably other craft stores. I don't really get into like Michael's or Joann Fabrics much, but we're gonna stain that with some antique wax and using a baby wipe, and then we're gonna just use a little bit of hot glue to apply that to the front. I just put it on several places where it was easy to get the hot glue, press that down, and that is it for this one. It's a pretty easy one as far, or simple, I suppose, as far as all of the pieces involved, but the chippy look technique was a fun one to try again because it's been a while. For this final DIY, I have this wood crate from the Dollar Tree. I got this a long time ago and it was really random. It was the only one I ever saw. It is far bigger than the other wooden crates, but you can get them at various places. So wherever you can find a wood crate, or just do a smaller one. But I'm going to give it a dry brush of white. I had already painted the outside, I think for a previous DIY, but I wanted to make sure that the whole thing was done. So I'm just going in and we're going to just, it's a heavy dry brush. It's not like it's actually not a dry brush. That's not the good description of it, but it's a messy coat. I wanted the wood to peek through, and I picked a kind of a rougher paintbrush, and that helped out a lot. And then I didn't have to go back and sand it down, which is also an option to get that paint look as well if you want. I did go ahead and paint the bottom as well, even though that's not going to be seen, but you know, you're going to get a crate and paint this. Now, originally my idea was to use more of those rub-on transfer numbers, but I really wanted this to all look unified, so I ended up using some Dollar Tree stickers that you can see here. These are from, yeah, I said Dollar Tree stickers. And I'm once again going to use my little tweezers. I recently got these, I think when we got like a cell phone repair or something or other, but I snagged them for my crafting area. But I'm using a ruler to just kind of get them centered. And this is when I realized, I think I had previously, sorry, my head keeps getting in the way. It will get better, but I think I had previously must have Mod Podged the front of this, and that's why they weren't sticking super great. So it took me a little bit to get them in place and get into a groove. But I decided to put like a farm name, an established year, and I just went onto Pinterest and I found a site that listed a bunch of different like farm names, farmhouse business names, those kinds of things. Like they were ideas, they weren't like actual farms. And I just kind of pieced one together from there. I didn't actually take one of the examples. I landed with Happy Acres Farm, and I like that. As you can see, when I was pressing down the stickers, I tore one of them. But we got these back in place. I was able to line up the 9 so you couldn't tell. It went with 1924, so it's a 100-year-old farm. That's just the idea that popped into my head. And then, of course, I didn't want the stickers to look like stickers, and I didn't want to look like that was fresh and new. So I very lightly dry brushed with some white paint. I do end up building on it to get it a little bit more white. I'm being very careful because these stickers were not sticking super great, only because there was a Mod Podge layer underneath from a previous DIY. I've had great success with these stickers in the past. They also come in red and green. And then I went over it with some Mod Podge because I really needed some help to stick down those letters. But I thought this was a really cute idea, and you could use it just empty. I do show it here displayed in just a second with some florals, but I also might just use it in my decor totally empty. But you could put anything you wanted in it too. You could use it for like practical storage of some kind as well. But that's it for this DIY. This first DIY, I had this glass bottle pretty sure I picked this up from Walmart on clearance a while ago. And I was like, I'm sure I can get this label off. So I ended up not filming all of this, but I first tried scraping it and it was not coming off at all. So what I ended up doing was soaking a paper towel in vinegar, and apparently I didn't film that, put it in a Ziploc baggie and let it sit. Now ended up letting this sit for like weeks because I moved on to other projects. So in turn, the lid got rusty, which ended up working out for my rustic vibe. But this really only would have taken like probably 24 hours. So I am going to just carefully take this out to not get like rust and all the things everywhere. Take the lid off. We will just leave that as is. And as you can see, at first it's like, okay, did anything happen here? But I use just this like little scraper tool that you would use to like scrape stuff off of your dishes. And it just came off, no problem. And this tool is not going to scratch the glass either. And so the vinegar worked really, really good for this label. And I was very excited because that just gave me a clean slate for a farmhouse piece. So once I had the label off, I did clean the whole outside with some rubbing alcohol to just make sure there was no residue, there was no fingerprints or anything like that. And then I'm just using some tools that I had on hand to keep this bottle from rolling. And then I have a piece of vinyl that was given to me by a friend, which is awesome because I don't have a vinyl cutting machine. And I'm just going to put this on, my head's going to get in the way, but we're going to put this on, doing my best to center it. And I thought that this little vinyl piece will look really pretty with like an initial in the middle. And so that's what I'm going to do. You could also stencil on the same type of thing with paint. So if you don't have any vinyl, and then I'm using a pair of tweezers. I love using those for applying stickers. And this is just a poster sticker from the Dollar Tree in there. I think it might be in like their school / like office area. And that's it. I ended up not Mod Podging the vinyl or the sticker, but you can if you want. I am Mod Podging the lid. I use a matte finish because I wanted it to still look like the matte finish, but I didn't want the rust pieces to keep flaking off in my decor. So I did put a coat of Mod Podge on this. And this jar is very pretty displayed with a lid on, but I think it would also be pretty with it displayed off and just some floral stems in there. It's kind of hard to get a good shot of this because it's glass and the lighting and all of the reflections, but I love how it came out. For this next one, this was originally a sign from the Dollar Tree that I have previously painted and DIY'd. So take a sign, a frame, whatever you've got. For the background here, I am cutting down some cardstock. This is like a craft paper color cardstock. I got this from HTV Ront. They got a big pack of it because I love rusticy decor, and so I thought this was a good thing to have on hand. So what I did was I cut mine down to the size of the frame, like where the white part is, which originally was, like I said, a picture that I'd previously painted over. And my paper cutter, unfortunately, didn't allow me to use the paper cutter for both sides, so I carefully traced a straight line and cut that out. And I wanted it to like slide under the frame so that you wouldn't see any white peeking out. So that's why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. But you don't have to do that, and you may not need to, depending on what you are DIYing with. So what I did was saw that it fit, pulled it out, and then I put on a good layer of Mod Podge. This cardstock is pretty thick, so I wasn't really worried about it getting like super wrinkly or anything. And so I put a good coat in there, and I tried to move pretty quickly because I didn't want it to get tacky before I could like maneuver this in there and slide it underneath the frame. And once it got to where I wanted it, I did use, well, here I'm just using a paper towel, but then I'm going to use this little squeegee scraper tool. It's like rubber. This is from the company Plaid that makes Mod Podge. And then I put some blocks, I put them in like each of the corners and then put a weight down because I was really concerned about like the corners like adhering really well. So that's what I did. Once that was dry, I pulled these rulers out of my stash. I have had these in my stash forever. I remember I used to see DIYs with them all the time, never could find the rulers, finally found them, and then did nothing with them. So I'm going to use a couple packs today, and we're going to build out our frame to be a little bit, chunkier than what this sign came with. So I'm cutting it down to size, and I'm going to cut it a little bit bigger than the frame so it hangs over. So I just figured out how I wanted that to look, and we're going to cut these out. I am going to use 2 packs altogether, and I'm using my miter saw, my miter box, And for the ones that I wanted the same, I taped them together and cut them at the same time so that they would be more uniform. And then I did sand down any rough edges and smoothed that out. Then also from my stash, I have this chicken wire, and we're going to cut this down to size. Now, because I was trying to glue the chicken wire and the wood frame pieces, I wanted the chicken wire to be sandwiched in between and stick really good. So this took a while because I took a couple of steps to do it, but I took some Gorilla household glue and some E6000 and then lined up the chicken wire and then placed the ruler on top, and then I put something down to weight that down until the glue fully dried. I didn't feel like hot glue was going to be good enough. This was me figuring out what I wanted to do. And I was like, no, I need something heavy. And my head, of course, kept getting in the way. But I have a container for like scrapbook paper that's pretty heavy. And I laid that down. And I just did one section at a time so that I knew it was going to stick really, really good. So I didn't show you all of that, but I did want to take the time to explain how I did that. And I thought the chicken wire would be best like kind of sandwiched in between these pieces. Now I did put the top side of the ruler, so the top side of the ruler went down, and so there wasn't as much material because it was, there's layers to it. You would know if you saw it, but that may not be the case for yours. You could also use painter sticks, which would be totally flat. So I won't take too much more time on that. So now I'm just using some lightweight spackling to fill this in. It wasn't completely even. I didn't need it perfect because I was going for rustic, but I did fill that in and let that dry. And then I just had shoved and folded a piece of computer paper on the chicken wire because I didn't want to get anything in that because we're going to paint the frame. So once the spackling was dry, I sanded it down. Again, we're just going for rough, so it didn't need to be like perfect there. And then I'm going to use a chippy brush, but do a pretty good coat with the chippy brush of just some white chalk paint. If you are enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out a lot. It lets me know that you're enjoying my video, but also that kind of positive, well, really any engagement, lets YouTube know that people are enjoying it, and it makes them more likely to share my video with other viewers, so that helps me out so much. Also, subscribe if you're new. If you're not subscribed, I share budget-friendly DIYs on this channel. I'd love for you to be a part of my YouTube family. It's okay to plug ourselves. We're supposed to do that. I just don't always remember. All right, so up next from my stash, something else that a friend sent to me were these molds, these resin molds. I do not have any molds. I've never worked with resin, not yet. Maybe someday I'll venture into it, but I haven't really wanted to get all of the things for it yet. But so I had a friend that sent me these, and that was awesome. So I'm giving them a good coat of white paint, just trying to make sure you get into all the grooves. These molds are so detailed, so I didn't want to, miss any of those details. So now we're going to go in and do some distressing or texture or whatever you want to call it on our frame. I'm using a stencil brush from the Dollar Tree, very little brown paint. I'm using up what's in my stash. I think this might be burnt umber. I don't know, but I'm just using what I've got. And I'm just going to add on layers of that until it looks the way that I wanted it to look. I didn't want a flat white frame. So that's just my personal preference. And then we're going to go in with that stencil brush and go over these molds. And I probably should have put some clear wax on this first. That might have made it easier to wipe off, but it ended up working out just fine. But I would recommend that if you're trying this. And I think I knew that. I just, forgot when I was in the middle of it. So I'm just using a little bit of paint. Try not to go too heavy, and then I can go back. But I just wanted to bring out all of those details. And I wanted to do it with just brown because I was going for a more rustic farmhouse, like neutral feel, but you of course can add in color wherever you want. You do yours DIYs to fit your style, but I just kind of kept going and building on it until I liked the way it looked. Missed a couple letters there. Okay, everything is dry. Pulling out my paper here, and now this part here, I'm going to take you on a tiny little journey. I was like, how am I going to glue this? I needed them to adhere, and the chicken wire was going to bounce up. So I'm going to explain it to you and then show you as little of this as possible. I took some popsicle sticks and I used a combination of the Gorilla household glue and some some hot glue. And I'm attaching a piece of a popsicle stick underneath the chicken wire so that it would have something to grab onto of more like without the chicken wire being in the way as much. So then I did the same to attach the resin piece, and after a little bit I realized that the hot glue, it was just still moving around because the household glue hadn't dried yet and the hot glue dried without attaching it. I'm not really sure what the problem was, so I peeled it off. Ultimately, what I ended up doing was realizing I needed to build up that popsicle stick a little bit higher. So I ended up doing that a little bit with this piece. When you cut the popsicle stick into smaller pieces, they tend to break. So we're gonna skip ahead here to the last resin piece to show you how I think works best. So what I decided to do, I pulled out a smaller popsicle stick and cut a small piece that would fit behind the resin piece, but I took two pieces, glued them together just with some hot glue. Then I attached this underneath the chicken wire where there was plenty of surface for me to attach my medallion or the resin piece, whatever you want to say it. Still did the combination of the hot glue and the household glue, and then I let that dry with some weights on top of it. And ultimately, I really love how this sign came out. Let me know what you think about it. I wanted to do something without words because a lot of my stuff does have words. For this next piece, I'm going to start where the footage starts. So I'm taking a tumbling tower block and I am gluing that inside of a lid from a jar. I'm using E6000, what was that, in hot glue, or was that household glue? Now I'm not even sure what I'm doing. Yeah, hot glue. Okay. And I'm putting some extra glue around the rim, but what I'm needing to do is attach this metal lid to the bottom of this terracotta tray. I picked these up at Hobby Lobby. I'm trying to remember how much they were. It was a pack of like 6 of them for only a couple of dollars. I think they were marked down to, I want to say like $1.99, maybe $2.99. But I put that tumbling tower block because I needed some more surface to attach the two pieces. So this is going to seem like we're going all over the place, but it's going to come together. Now I'm taking some wood signs. These are also, I think, clearance from Hobby Lobby, or you could pick up something from Dollar Tree or Dollar General, wherever. Sanding them down, and we're going to attach these two pieces. What we're making is some candlesticks. And I love the big, beautiful candlesticks, but they can be pretty pricey, and I thought it would be fun to try to make my own. So for this, I'm going to use some household glue and some wood glue. With these materials, I probably should have just skipped the hot glue because it did create a little bit of a gap, but we will fix that. And I'm weighting them down, letting them dry. And then I'm taking some pieces outside to my garage to spray paint. Those little pieces of tape are to block off the places where I'm going to need to glue things, and I should have done that more precisely, but I didn't. I just kind of estimated, so I had to go back and do some touch-up paint later. But we're going to give all of these pieces a base coat of white spray paint. I did a matte finish, and then we're going to go in with some Waverly chalk paint in the color white. And I'm going to give all of these pieces. So the bottom with the jar lid and then the two square pieces are going to be the two bases for a set of candlesticks. And then I have those terracotta trays, and each of those are going to be the tops to my candlesticks with some spindles in between. It's all going to make sense here in just a minute. But I wanted to have the finish of the chalk paint, but I just thought that the porous materials might do better with a base of spray paint. So now I'm showing you that there was some gaps there from the hot glue where it just wasn't super tight fit. So I went in with some lightweight spackling, and I'm going to smear that all in there. Now, I may have been able to avoid that if I had not used hot glue, but I think I still would have needed it on this round piece. So once again, I'm just smushing that in there, letting that dry, and I should have done that before I did it, a coat of paint, but hindsight's 20/20. And then I was trying to sand off the excess spackling, but I didn't want to peel off any of this paint, especially on this material, this terracotta and the metal. So I just was very, very careful to only sand right where there was some chunks of the spackling. I hope it's all making sense. Hopefully seeing it explains it more than what my words can do. So once I had all of those gaps cleaned up, I went in and did one more coat of the white chalk paint. Probably wouldn't have taken so many coats if I had, done that in a different order. But, I have these ideas in my head, but making them come to life, sometimes I figure that part out as it goes. So I just like to show you guys the real life. This is This is what we call the creative process. That is how we justify and explain our mistakes. It's part of the creative process. So now we're going to move on to the spindles. This was in my stash and I am sanding them down, and they just were a little bit, they needed to be smoothed out. They weren't perfectly smooth, like that's not what I was going for, but I just also wanted to clean them up. So I'm sanding them down just pretty lightly. I tried to do like wrap the sandpaper around the top part of the spindles, and then it just kind of shredded, but you know, it's okay. I did the best I could. We got them cleaned up was the main thing. So once I sanded it down, I did wipe it down with like a baby wipe, and then I let it dry because obviously the wood got a little wet from the baby wipe, and we're going to just let that dry. Now I'm going to stain these spindles with some antique wax by Waverly. I'm getting to the bottom of my bottle. I've told you, crafting my stash, using up everything I got. And this might have been easier to use with a paintbrush and then wipe it off with a baby wipe because I was trying to get in all of the little grooves on the spindle, but it's okay. Either way, it happened. And you know, in the end, that is all that really matters, is that it happened. Now, these candlesticks, I'm going to be using my battery operated flameless candles. So I'm not super worried about like how stable it is, although it did end up being very stable. I'm going to show you the process for that as well. But if you have all wood pieces, you could also just drill a hole, screw it in, do all of that. But that's not what I had. And I was going with what I could find that I either had on hand or that was super budget friendly. And when I found those terracotta pieces, they were very budget friendly. So that's what we went with. So we're going to stain this, wipe with some antique wax, and then I did go in with just a paper towel and wipe off any excess and let them dry. All right, so now it comes to assembling, and this is when I was like, you know, I really should have paid more attention to the painter's tape. I should have actually measured the tops and bottoms of the spindles and then cut out painter's tape that was slightly smaller, so that there was no paint that I needed to like touch up. But right now we're working on the tops of the candlesticks. I just used E6000 and wiped off any excess, and this held really well. The wood with the terracotta, the E6000 was totally adequate. I did weight it down. I think I stacked on some paint bottles and let it dry before I worked on the bottom piece because I wanted to make sure it was staying good. So when we get to the bottom piece, this was a learning curve. The metal did not work super great. So the square base, which was also like a wood slash like MDF type of sign, that worked really good. But this one here, I could tell after waiting quite a while that it was not, it was rocking. I could tell it did not adhere. So I was like, okay, I'm not really sure what to do here. So what I ended up doing was going in with some more E6000, which again, that may have just been the piece that I should have skipped. I don't know, but I went in with my Gorilla household glue, and this ended up working great. So use what you've got. Because of the surfaces, that's where I wasn't really sure what to do, but have no fear. Where there's a will, there's a way. Persevere, keep going. So once everything was good and dry, I could tell it was nice and sturdy. I went in with some white paint and a small paintbrush and touch up any of the areas that didn't get painted initially. So do better in the beginning and you won't have to do this, but it's okay. It didn't take that long. And then I wanted to seal this whole piece, so I'm using some DIY clear wax and just a clean cloth, and I'm just wiping that on. And I was a little bit nervous because I was like, I don't want to put any pressure and like I don't want anything to break. But it was sturdy, but I did hold each piece, especially when I did like the top part. I held onto it so that I wasn't rocking it too much. But I wiped it on, and then I did go in with a second clean cloth and just really buffed it in. But you could also use Mod Podge if you don't have the clear wax. And I just did this on the whole candlestick. And that is it for these candlesticks. Once again, I had a hard time with the filming because there was lots of shadows, but I was so happy with how these came out. Tell me what you might have done differently, give some more ideas, but I was pleased with them in the end. For this last DIY, I have a metal metal clipboard that I pulled the clip part off of. If you saw a recent video of mine, I used another one of these. I had two of them in my stash. So what we're going to do is give this a coat of Mod Podge so that it will take to paint better, just because it is a metal piece. But you can use, you know, anything you've got to be the base for a sign. Once that Mod Podge was nice and dry, I gave it a couple coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color white. I think it's Snow White. But yes, just a couple of coats of that. It did take 2 coats to have good coverage and not have the streaks. So just make sure you let it dry adequately in between your coats of paint. Now, once that paint was dry, I did put in another coat of Mod Podge. This time I did make sure to use a matte finish because I wanted the matte appearance. Sometimes I'll use another one if it's just going underneath everything because it doesn't matter, but they do have different finishes. But I'm just really careful when it comes to paint on metal because it does like to chip off. Then digging into my stash, I had this piece. This was from the Dollar Tree. It originally had a windmill attached to the top from, I think, their like garden area. So I wanted to pull this triangle metal piece off. Be very careful. I'm using a heat gun, and you know, heat makes metal hot. So use with caution. There was only like 3 places across the bar I could tell that had any place where it was attached. So I focused on them, took my little scraper, I think that's called, actually it might be a putty knife, but and wedged that under, targeted the heat, bent it back and forth, and I got it off. I was trying to be careful because I didn't want to pull up and bend the welcome sign in doing this. So I tried to be really cautious and not bend that. And I did bend just a little bit, so I flipped it over, banged it down, smoothed it out. And then for the other piece for a sign, I have this MDF truck. I don't remember if this was from Dollar Tree or Hobby Lobby. It's been in my stash for a long time. And I like it, but what's the point of having it in my stash if I'm not going to use it? So we're going to give this one good coat. I'm using Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and I am making sure to get all of the edges. So it took a little bit just to get all of the edges on the tire and, you know, the truck bed and all of that. But, you know, it's painting. It's not hard. Give it a good coat. I went with black for my choice today. Once I was done painting it and it dried, I did go ahead and seal this with Mod Podge. I don't know if that was necessary for this particular piece of material, but I did it. I figured, why not? Now we're going to go ahead and assemble our sign. And of course, I got to cover up those holes on the side of the sign. And twine, jute twine, is rustic in Farmhouse. So we're going to go around. This is a thicker jute twine. I picked it up at a thrift store for a really low price. It is huge. It is a huge spool of jute twine. It still had the packaging on it. It was originally from Hobby Lobby. And I will be using this literally forever. I mean, I don't know that I will ever run out of it, but it's great to have on hand. So I'm going to glue this. Now I'm using hot glue and I'm doing small sections because hot glue on metal will dry fast. So truth be told, if I wanted to go around and pull this twine off, I probably could, but it's on there really good. But if I needed to pull it off, it would come off because it's hot glue on metal. But it's not going anywhere on its own. I just did little sections at a time. And I did go twice around, and then I'm using a lighter. This is to burn off the fuzzies from the jute twine, but also like glue strings because I use so much hot glue. I just wanted to kind of clean up that a little bit. And I like the burnt look it gives to jute twine as well. So burn that off carefully, you know, don't play with fire. And now we're going to attach everything. I did not finish the back. I just left it metal, but you can feel free to do that if that bothers you. Or maybe you don't need to because you're not using a metal clipboard. You know, that's not standard for most people, but this is for inspiration. So I'm using the Gorilla Household Glue. I did smear it with my fingers on like the small places because I didn't want there to be any thick pieces that are thick parts of the glue that would like ooze out the edge. So I just wanted like a thin layer there. And I put a little bit of hot glue in the center for that quick hold. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the welcome sign. And then I did weight this down with some pieces to just make sure that it had really good contact while that household glue dried, because that took, you know, that takes a little bit longer than the hot glue. But I wanted to make sure that it had a good attachment. And that's how this one came out. Let me know what you think down below. I was pleased with this simple little piece. That is going to do it for today's video. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It's a great way to help me out. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if you have any favorites, and subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.